and President Trump's decision to pull American troops out of Syria, half of the U.S. troops of Afghanistan, a place you just returned from. You have said this could pave the way for a second 9/11 in the U.S. If ISIS reconstitutes itself after the U.S. leaves, does President Trump bear responsibility?
Well, number one, everything we're dealing with today falls on Obama's watch. He's the one that withdrew from Iraq. In 2011, October 21st,
but he did it because there was a status of forces agreement with Iraq, right?
No, that's a bunch of bullshit. Pardon my French. That's a complete lie.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Dana Bash. President Trump is spending his holiday at the White House making new threats over funding for his border wall, days after his surprise visit to U.S. troops in Iraq and Germany, where he defended his controversial decision to pull U.S. forces out of Syria in very Trumpian terms.
If they want us to do the fighting, they also have to pay a price. And sometimes that's also a monetary price. So we're not the suckers of the world.
Joining me now is Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, and the incoming head of the Judiciary Committee. Senator, I want to talk about national security in a moment. Let's start with the shutdown. You've been on the phone with your colleagues. Right. Any movement in breaking the impasse?
Yeah, a bit. The one thing I know for sure that nothing will get out of the Senate without wall/border funding, and Democrats are not going to give us any money for wall border security without getting something themselves. So here's what I think might work. $5 billion for the wall/border security. Democrats have voted for more than that in the past. Married up with the Bridge Act, which Senator Durbin and I wrote, a 3-year one-time renewable work permit for the DACA population, about 700,000. We have about 400,000 TPS people who came here from natural disasters and war-torn countries decades ago. Their visas are running out. So basically $5 billion for the wall, plus the Bridge Act, TPS, and some legal changes to do away with some of these magnets to illegal immigration might save the day in the Senate.
Okay, Senator, this is the gist of this, which is money for the border wall in exchange for legal status, at least for the so-called Dreamers, has been out there before. Democrats have rejected it.
And TPS reform.
Right. The Democrats have rejected it. The White House has rejected it. What makes you think it's going to fly now?
Well, the bottom line is everything I just outlined has been offered by each party before. You know, President Trump is not going to walk away from this fight without border security funding, money for the wall, for lack of a better way of saying it. And Democrats have a chance here to work with me and others, including the president, to bring legal status to people who have very uncertain lives. I'm not asking anybody to do something new. I'm just asking people to sit down and rearrange the deal that was offered before.
You probably hear this from Democrats and Republicans. If I'm hearing it, you're hearing it, that they don't trust they don't want to go into a potential deal like you just described because they're not convinced that the president is going to pull the rug out from under them, just like he did on December 19th when you and your fellow Democrats and Republicans approved a funding bill that he later said he would veto, even though he didn't say that at the time.
Well, we need to start talking again, and let's talk about pulling the rug out from under each other. I've been working on this for 10 years. Democrats have voted for 700 miles of secure fencing in 2006. They voted for $25 billion for the wall in February. In 2013, we voted for $42 billion for border security, including $9 billion for a wall/fence. The bottom line is they want Trump to lose more than they want the country to win, I fear. At the end of the day, there's a deal to be had, but everybody's changing their position here, and most Americans are pretty tired of it. So to my Democratic friends, there'll never be a deal without wall funding, and many Republicans are going to offer something as an incentive to vote for wall funding that you have supported in the past.
You talk about everybody changing their position. I have to ask you about something that seems to be getting lost in this conversation, which is that when you were running against the president in the Republican primaries and then all through the general election, he did say that this was a campaign promise to build a wall, but he also said Mexico would pay for it, not the American taxpayers. What happened to that?
Well, I'm not asking Mexico to pay for it. I'm asking the American people to pay for it. Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, we'll see how the NAFTA deal, I think he'll claim that Mexico is paying more under the new NAFTA deal. But I'm not talking about what he said back during the campaign. I'm talking about what we can do now to open up a government that needs to be opened up. The Coast Guard's not going to get paid here soon. DHS is an important national security function. We need wall money. Democrats have voted for it in the past. The president's put on the table more than the Bridge Act, more than TPS. So I hope calmer heads will prevail. I've talked to several Democratic senators. There is a deal to be had, I think, if the president would get behind it. $5 billion for the wall, the Bridge Act, TPS, and some legal reform, and we can reopen the government and be a more secure nation.
Real quick, are you going to, assuming you do take the gavel as Judiciary Chairman, hold hearings on the deaths of migrant children?
Yeah, I'm going to hold hearings on the deaths of these two children and the policies that entice people to come. One of the mothers of these children was not seeking asylum. She was just trying to come here to find a job. Right now, we have 11,000 unaccompanied minors from Central America. 98% of them never leave. In 2014, Dianne Feinstein asked President Obama to change our policy. If we have an unaccompanied minor from Central America, they should be sent back to their home country, just like if they were from Mexico. That's a legal change we need to make with this deal.
Senator, let's talk about foreign policy and President Trump's decision to pull American troops out of Syria, half of the U.S. troops of Afghanistan, a place you just returned from. You have said this could pave the way for a second 9/11 in the U.S. If ISIS reconstitutes itself after the U.S. leaves, does President Trump bear responsibility?
Well, number one, everything we're dealing with today falls on Obama's watch. He's the one that withdrew from Iraq. In 2011, October 21st,
but he did it because there was a status of forces agreement with Iraq, right?
No, that's a bunch of bullshit. Pardon my French. That's a complete lie.
Why?
That's a
that
complete,
didn't happen?
absolute lie. I've been there. Yeah, I was there talking to the Prime Minister of Iraq, and he said, how many soldiers you're talking about? Obama wanted to get to zero. He got to zero. In October the 21st, 2011, I said, I hope the president's right. Now I'm wrong, but I fear this decision will come back to haunt us. ISIS came about as a result of our withdrawal from Iraq. The caliphate was established in Syria because Obama sat on the sidelines and watched the place be dismembered.
Now President Trump
let's focus on now.
Go for it.
Now, he was dealt a bad hand by Obama, and he needs to play it better than he's playing it. Keeping the troops in Iraq is great. Right now, after having been back from Afghanistan, I can tell you that ISIS is on the rise in Afghanistan. But if Pakistan would help us, we could get Taliban to the table and end the war in Afghanistan. Our presence then would be focused on counterterrorism, ISIS. As to Syria, there are three things important to this country. Number one, make sure that ISIS never comes back in Syria. That's why we need to keep some of our troops there. They're inside the 10-yard line in defeating ISIS, but we're not there yet.
How are you
if we
going to
leave
convince
now,
President
the Kurds
Trump
are going to
of
get
that?
slaughtered. I'm going to talk to him at lunch. He has talked to General Dunford. I got a call from General Dunford. The president is reconsidering how we do this. He's frustrated. I get it. People should pay more. They should fight more. But we're not the policemen in the world here. We're fighting a war against ISIS. They're still not defeated in Syria. I'm asking the president to make sure that we have troops there to protect us. Don't outsource our national security to some foreign power. If we leave now, the Kurds will get in a fight with Turkey. They could get slaughtered. Who would help you in the future? And if we leave now, there'll be a land bridge from Tehran to Beirut.
And this is something you're going to tell the president
weapons
at lunch
against
today?
Israel. Yeah, I'm going to ask the president to do something President Obama would never do. Reconsider. This is being done by President Trump against sound military advice. The president went to Iraq. Thank you very much for going. I'm going to ask him to sit down with his generals and reconsider how to do this. Slow this down, make sure that we get it right, make sure ISIS never comes back. Don't turn Syria over to the Iranians. That's a nightmare for Israel. And at the end of the day, if we leave the Kurds and abandon them and they get slaughtered, who's going to help you in the future? I want to fight the war in the enemy's backyard, not ours. That's why we need a forward deployed force in Iraq and Syria and Afghanistan for a while to come. Here's the good news. If we play our cards right, we can reduce our footprint in all three countries, have people do more and pay more is a goal I share with the president.
Senator, you were one of the president's biggest critics in the campaign. You're now one of his closest confidants, as evidenced by the fact that you're going to go have lunch with him today about this. But you've done it in part because you have felt like you could help guide him on issues that matter the most to you, like foreign policy. So far,
Right,
he hasn't
right,
listened to your
right.
advice on Syria or on the Saudis, on really holding the Saudis to account on the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. So do you
Right.
feel like this relationship that you've cultivated has been worth it?
Absolutely. I feel like I've had more access to this president than every president combined.
Access,
We don't
but
always
actual
agree.
influence in policymaking?
Wait, well, let me tell you, I'm generally very pleased. He pulled out of the Iranian agreement, which was a nightmare. He's increased military spending to a level that I could not be more pleased with. He changed the rules of engagement in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, so ISIS is just about destroyed. All I ask him to do is make sure we don't fumble the ball inside the 10-yard line. Sit down with your generals, make sure we get Syria right. See if we can go to Pakistan and put a free trade agreement on the table to get the Pakistanis to push the Taliban to the peace table, and you can end the Afghan war. He has destroyed ISIS virtually on his watch. He has put Iran on the run. He has rebuilt our military. So from a foreign policy point of view, and we now talk to North Korea from a position of strength. I'm generally pleased. But the Syrian decision caught me by surprise. I fear it's going to undercut all we have achieved, and I'll ask the president to reconsider. And I think he's going to sit down with his generals and make an informed, well thought out decision. That's all you can ask any president to do. Obama knew better than anybody. General Obama was a disaster. He never reconsidered any decision. I hope President Trump will, and I believe he will.
Let me get quickly, before we let you go, to one question about the role that you're going to have coming into the next Congress, Judiciary Chairman, and that is going to be running the confirmation process for the president's new Attorney General, Bill Barr. In a memo this summer, Senator, Barr wrote that Robert Mueller's investigation into possible obstruction of justice by President Trump is, quote, fatally misconceived and could have disastrous implications for the presidency. If this were a Democratic nominee overseeing an investigation into a Democratic president, would you see that memo as a problem?
I think when you fire an attorney general, it's pretty hard to obstruct the justice if you can have, almost unlimited ability to fire the attorney general. I share many of Mr. Barr's thoughts about the consequences of obstruction justice for personnel decisions. But having said that, he'll need to defend his reasoning. I have a lot of confidence in Mr. Barr. I think he's a great choice. Like any other citizen, he can offer his opinion. And that's why we have the hearings. He'll be tested. I will support him unless I hear something really out of left field. I think he's a good choice by the president.
Senator Lindsey Graham, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a good lunch.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
And while